The worst Gen 9 Legendary just won the biggest Pokemon tournament of all time. While singles players might be confused as to why Koraidon is the worst out of Miraidon, Terapagos, and itself, the facts are that Koraidon's typing and generally inferior damage output compared to Miraidon makes it a much more difficult Pokemon to succeed with. Meanwhile, Terapagos is able to maintain pins on certain Pokemon when they want to Terastallize to avoid a super effective hit from other Pokemon on its team. While Koraidon is not awful, it has spent the past year coming short of winning events, with only a few players representing the Pokemon. But this past weekend, Wolfie Glick managed not only to win a major with Koraidon, but he won the largest Pokemon tournament of all time with over 1,200 players all going for the win.
But it wasn't enough!
So let's talk about his win and what we can learn from this event. If you enjoyed this video at any point in time, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. With that, let's get into the video, but not before I plug my YouTube channel memberships. If you click the join button, not only do you get access to bonus videos every week and access to my podcast with Jody Azzarelli, but you also can join my members only Discord where we team build and discuss Pokemon broadly. You also get a badge by your name in the comments and in my live streams, and you get to see your name at the end of videos. Lots of cool perks there, so consider supporting me with the channel membership. Now back to the video. Like I said, Koraidon has been fighting off the fraud allegations for the entirety of Regulation G VGC tournaments. While it has phenomenal stats and an ability which not only sets up Sun, but gives it a 33% boost to its attack stat while the Sun is active, Koraidon struggles in Regulation G due to some unfortunate matchups and its poor defensive typing. On top of that, its strongest move, Flare Blitz, only gets its maximum power if Koraidon decides to tear it into a fire type while Sun is active, which is a pretty big commitment in Gen 9 VGC. The Pokemon you tear each game can make or break the match. Without Terastallizing Koraidon, it has to fear getting one-hit KO'd by the likes of not only restricteds like Miraidon, Calyrex Shadow Rider, and Calyrex Ice, but it needs to be concerned with the omnipresent Flutter Mane, which will always outspeed and one-shot it in the sun due to photosynthesis. Wolfie Glick saw potential in this Pokemon to enable his favorite archetype of Perish Trap. Two of the best Pokemon on Perish Trap teams are Fluttermane and Screamtail due to their access to the move Perish Song and their offensive and support tools respectively. Both of these Pokemon have photosynthesis, meaning that they're able to boost their stats as long as Sun is active. The thing with Perish Trap is that while it is a very passive archetype that uses Gothitelle with a Perish Song Pokemon to trap in Pokemon and have them faint after the 3-turn timer, it's much more effective when the team has an option to quickly remove opposing Pokemon from the field with huge damage output. Perish Trap teams can try to slowly win the match by Perish Trapping everything, but if the user can score 2 KOs while preserving the Perish Song user, they can effectively win at that point in the game, since clicking Perish Song when the opponent has no more Pokemon to switch to is a very powerful win condition. Wolfie used Koraidon for this purpose. A typical Koraidon will run a Clear Amulet with some Bulk, Flare Blitz, Collision Course, Flame Charge, and Protect, but Wolf's Koraidon actually ran a Life Orb for even greater damage output and dropped its signature move of Collision Course for close combat. The reason for this is Collision Course is a very strong base 100 power move with no drawbacks that also deals 33% more damage with super effective hits, making it so super effective hits are basically guaranteed one-hit KOs. But close combat broadly deals more damage across the board since it has 120 base power. This with a Life Orb means that Koraidon is a knockout machine, making it much easier to get that 4-2 Pokemon lead and click Perish Song for the win. The most important interaction with this Pokemon is into its rival legendary Miraidon, which is broadly considered to be the best restricted Pokemon in the format. But the average Koraidon's Collision Course will only deal 78% HP and damage to fast Miraidons. Meanwhile, Wolfie's Life Orb Close Combat Koraidon has a guaranteed one-hit KO into fast Miraidon, allowing him to quickly remove the opponent's legendary Pokemon from play. Meanwhile, a Terrafire Flare Blitz becomes an even stronger option into other restricteds like Calyrex Shadow, Calyrex Ice, and Groudon. Once the opponent's restricted legendary is down, Perish Trapping with his full support Screamtail becomes a much easier task since the damage output from the opponent is significantly cut, making it even harder for that Gothitelle to get KO'd and releasing the Shadow Tag trap. Wolfie Glick, on his way to his championship, took down a Calyrex Shadow Rider with Rain piloted by Theoteam Masu, a version of the World Championship winning Miraidon team piloted by Terran Birdie, and in finals, a really incredible Iron Treads Miraidon team piloted by Dill Yemens. As it turns out, all it really took to have Koraidon succeed was the right team and the right player. Major props to Wolfie Glick for the win, and with that, let's talk about the tournament broadly. Okay, so that was a nice little intro. I got to explain Wolfie's team. I got to talk about how great of a player he was, you know. We're going to go ahead and talk about the rest of this tournament. We're going to be explaining just what Pokemon did well, which Pokemon seem to have fallen off in this recent event, and just go over the whole event with Labmouse. Shout out Labmouse, my favorite Top Cut Explorer-esque website. Lets you look at a lot of resources, like it lets you look like a lot of things like usage stats, which combos of Pokemon seem to have done the best. And yeah, shout out LabMouse. Love this website. It's not sponsored. It's just what I use whenever I talk about tournaments. Also, we're going to be doing this every time there's an event now. I haven't done this on main channel in a while, but I wanted to find a reason to talk about competitive on the main channel a little more often. But yeah, the rest of this is going to be kind of long form, a little more podcast-like, but you know, you can put it on the background while you play Minecraft. I know you guys have been into that lately. So, let's talk about this. Wolfie Glick obviously won. We covered his team. We can talk about a little bit more in depth, though. If we take a look at the team, you can see that it was Mental Herb, Amoonguss, Terra Dark, Protect, Rage Powder, Spore, Sludge Bomb. We have Screamtail with a Booster Energy, Terra Dark, Protect, Encore, Disable, Perish Song. If you're wondering why Terra Dark is such a good Terra for these two Pokemon, it's because, well, I mean, for Amoonguss, it probably doesn't matter as much because it's got the Mental Herb, so it doesn't really care about Taunt. But I'm assuming it's like doubling down because Perish Trap teams, you're relying a lot on your support moves, your non-attacking moves, or your non-damaging moves. So being able to block not only Prankster Taunt with the Terra Dark, but also being able to block non-Prankster Taunt with the Mental Herb is going to be super useful. And also, I believe removes you or releases you from like Encore and stuff. So yeah, that's really cool. Screamtail needs to be Terra Dark for a few reasons. Calyrex Shadow Rider is a nightmare for this team if you don't have a Terra Dark somewhere. And, you know, Incineroar is obviously able to deal with that pretty well. But you can see the team has a massive, massive Ghost-type weakness. But Wolfie obviously played around that quite well. Also, Screamtail does not want to get Prankster taunted by like Tornadus or Whimsicott, nor does it want to get Prankster Encored. So being a Dark-type blocks all Prankster moves. And yeah, it's running a full support set, which a lot of Screamtail, even on like Encore, Disable, Perish Song sets, don't like to run full support because having a damaging move is really useful. You know, you usually go for like a Dazzling Gleam or like I don't know, I think it gets like Icy Wind or something that help you out on that front, so you at least aren't like a sitting duck in front of a Pokemon like in the end game. Because there are some situations where you just KO everything but the Screamtail because it's just a non-issue and you're able to deal with it. But Screamtail is very powerful on these Perish Trap teams because of its speed boosting, photosynthesis, and the fact that it has just incredible bulk. It makes it so you're able to encore a Pokemon into a move that they have just used and then immediately disable it, forcing them to struggle. Or if they want to go for like a Protect, you can just force them to Protect again. If they go for a Fake Out, you can force them to Fake Out again. It's very strong. And like those tools comboed with Perish Song make it much easier to stall out those remaining turns. Fluttermane is just Terra Normal. You know, it makes you immune to the opposing ghost types like, you know, other Fluttermane and obviously Calyrex Shadow Rider. Icy Wind, Moonblast, Shadow Ball, Focus Sash. It's very standard. We have a Safety Goggles, Terra Bug, Incineroar, Fake Out, Parting Shot, Flare Blitz, Protect. Terra Bug is actually a really solid defensive type in this metagame. It allows you to resist like ground moves from opposing Landorus Incarnate without having to worry about getting hit super effectively by poison type moves like Sludge Bomb or other things that just grass types are weak to. And like Wolfie doesn't really need the grass typing because he obviously has Safety Goggles on this guy. We have the Life Orb Koraidon. I don't really need to explain that too much. I already talked about it for like 5 minutes extensively. We have Gothitelle with Terra Water, Leftovers, Protect, Psychic, Fake Out, and Taunt. Leftovers is actually really interesting for Gothitelle. There has to have been like some really important calcs where Leftovers was a little bit more effective because you see a lot of like Citrus Berry Gothitelle. And usually when a Pokemon wants to have like that extra longevity, it goes with Citrus Berry because that burst healing is enough to let it live a few more hits. But, you know, with Protect, you're going to get probably in the long run a lot more healing, especially when you have Encore, Disable, Screamtail next to it. But yeah, this team was incredible. We don't need to talk about it too much more. It was the first 5 minutes of the video, and now it's the next 5 minutes. Next up, what I want to talk about is the second place team. Dill Yemens absolutely cooked with this team. This is a Electric Seed for Farigiraf with Choice Specs Miraidon. We have Choice Band Terra Ghost Iron Treads. We have Focus Sash Terra Dark Urshifu, a Rocky Helmet Terra Ghost Incineroar, and a Terra Poison AV Low Kick Iron Hands. Now, here's some of the beauty of this team. You can do some really cool stuff. I believe there was a game where Dill actually led off with Iron Hands and Farigiraf, and they ended up going for Fake Out and Side Roar on, or they didn't lead off with it, but they wanted to get like a Fake Out and then a Fake Out again the next turn, or at least threaten the Fake Out or position a Pokemon better. But you can go for Fake Out and then Side Roar your Iron Hands to get in a more threatening Pokemon like Miraidon. Like, let's say, for example, the Trick Room is about to end and Iron Hands has just hit the field, but Miraidon can't protect, right? On that final turn of Trick Room, where things are scary, you can attack with the Iron Hands and on that same turn, pivot into the Miraidon. So Miraidon hits the field at the end of the turn instead of the beginning, because Manual Switch makes you go first. And then Miraidon hits the field safely when the Trick Room's over and it can start attacking again. The Choice Band Iron Treads was crazy because this is just a straight up I hate Iron Treads Pokemon, or I hate Miraidon Pokemon, because Iron Treads is Choice Banded High Horsepower is just going to one-shot most Miraidon, and Steel Roller is a extremely powerful move, but it only works while terrain is active. So, while Steel Roller isn't going to be clicked a ton because Iron Head is a little bit more consistent, especially with that Choice Band, you're going to click Steel Roller and then be trapped in and not be able to click it again. You'll have to switch out to switch your moves. It does allow for you to get like that huge burst damage. And there are even some plays you can make where you literally just like Volt Switch out with Miraidon after clicking the Steel Roller. So, you know, remove your own terrain in exchange for huge damage. And then you Volt Switch out and then the Miraidon just hits the field again and you can keep cycling those Steel Rollers. But yeah, this team is super cool. Obviously, Miraidon with Iron Hands and Farigiraf has been a truly strong archetype. Like, we have seen it literally win the World Championships. We saw it win the first event in Europe earlier on this year. And while it did get top 4 on the other, which other player was it? I think it was Terran, right? Terran ran like the World Championship team. We can see that like just these Pokemon, the Miraidon, the Iron Hands, and the Farigiraf are just so oppressive next to each other for good reason. I mean, like, Farigiraf and Iron Hands are very terrifying in Trick Room. The Farigiraf is able to block opposing priority moves. It's not able to get pranked or taunted. It's able to set up the Trick Room for the Iron Hands to get huge damage, and Iron Hands gets even more damage with its stab moves in Drain Punch and Low Kick due to the electric terrain, because it's going to get that not booster energy, the Cork Drive. But what's really cool is that this Iron Hands actually opted for Heavy Slam over like an electric move, and that was the case for the World Championship team as well. But it is really nice to know that like Iron Hands technically doesn't have to run any electric moves to get any work done, because Low Kick is just like a lot better than running Wild Charge in most situations, especially in this restricted format. Low Kick is going to allow you to deal basically the same damage as close combat to restricted Pokemon without having to deal with any of the downsides. And Drain Punch is just there for longevity. Terra Poison is obviously there to make sure that the Iron Hands is going to be able to resist opposing fairy type attacks without having to worry about getting hit super affected by surging strikes. And the Urshifu Single Strike is just another solid Pokemon here. Hyper offense all the way through. And yeah, no, this team was very solid. I think Dill, it was one of they're a much newer player on the scene, but the fact that they did so well with this team and the fact that they were able to bring in Iron Treads of all things to finals of EUIC is just like incredibly inspiring, in my opinion. But, you know, we also see in top 4, I could get rid of this. There we go. Yosuke, who ended up running a Ogerpon Cornerstone with Calyrex Ice, sort of balanced Trick Roomy team. Now, Cornerstone Calyrex Ice has been a really solid duo in the format because Cornerstone just provides a lot of value to teams. It's not only a Follow Me Pokemon that is immune to Rage Powder and Spore because of its grass typing, but Sturdy makes it so you're going to be able to Follow Me, take 2 hits, and then get the Trick Room off with the Calyrex Ice. It's one of the most consistent Pokemon next to Trick Room setters for that reason. It has great damage output with 100% accurate Ivy Cudgel, and Power Whip, while it is risky, is going to be able to one-shot a decent amount of Kyogres, while also dealing heavy damage to other water types like opposing Urshifu Rapid Strike. And, you know, just Follow Me is like a very useful tool. Of course, you know, next to this, you don't want to like be hard Trick Room all the time. You're going to be able to run it with like Choice Scarf, Chi-Yu, and Booster Energy Flutter Mane with Icy Wind and Urshifu Rapid Strike. Like, these Pokemon, besides like the Ogerpon Cornerstone, that tends to be like the flex pick, Chi-Yu, Flutter Mane, Calyrex Ice, Amoonguss, and like Urshifu Rapid Strike are kind of like the de facto Pokemon in the format. I guess not Calyrex Ice, but like these 4 in the corners, Chi-Yu, Flutter Mane, Amoonguss and Urshifu Rapid Strike, they find themselves on a ton of teams. Like Amoonguss will find itself on Calyrex Ice teams, Amoonguss will find itself on Groudon teams, it'll find itself on Kyogre teams. It's just like a very flexible Pokemon. And Chi-Yu, Fluttermane, while they're not restricted Pokemon, they hit like they're restricted Pokemon. They got stats like the restricted Pokemon. The Beads of Ruin decreasing the special defense stat of everything on the field and allowing Fluttermane to just get massive damage while also supporting the team with Icy Wind is just absurd. And of course, Taunt, Urshifu Rapid Strike is a Pokemon that we have seen picking up more often. You have to drop Aqua Jet for it, but in a lot of situations, because the opponent, you know, usually has a switch into Aqua Jet, and picking off sashes isn't really too much of an issue with Urshifu Rapid Strike, since you can just Surging Strikes them instead, is really nice. Like just having that Taunt to shut down opposing Trick Room, to shut down opposing Taunt if you're trying to Trick Room yourself, is really cool. So Urshifu Rapid Strike, obviously one of the goats of the format. And we already talked about the World Championship team that we saw Terra and Birdie run. But yeah, there are also a couple of other really cool things going on in this top cut. Francesco actually ran a Heatran. Now, Heatran is a very new adaptation to the Terapagos archetype, and it does a few things. So Terapagos Screamtail is a thing that's been around for a little bit. You know, Incineroar, Rillaboom, these support Pokemon, keeping the Terapagos healthy while it goes for Calm Minds, and then eventually gets to the point where it can just spam Terra Stellar, Terra Starstorm, is super done. Like it's been done a ton. But the Heatran is actually specifically like a matchup patch for opposing Zamazenta, because Terapagos' worst matchup in this metagame, you could argue Koraidon is a bad matchup if you're not running a Fluttermane on the team, and usually you put Fluttermane next to Terapagos because it forces fighting types to have to Terra, and then they get hit by Terra Starstorm, and then they die. But Heatran here is specifically for Zamazenta, because Terra Fairy Heatran just walls that dude. Heatran is heavy enough where it doesn't really mind the heavy slam too much, even with the fairy typing. And at that point, because it has such great defensive stats, it's able to eat the body press with the Terra Fairy. And then Magma Storm is just going to go ahead and deal huge damage to Zamazenta, force it to stay in, and then just die eventually. It's only 75 accuracy, but this is a Pokemon that we've been seeing gain usage throughout the format on Terapagos teams for this very purpose. But yeah, Screamtail is really cool next to this as well, because when you trap in a Pokemon with the Heatran, you're going to be able to also do some really goofy stuff like Encore Disable, make it so they can't switch, and then they're just a sitting duck. Incineroar is also another matchup for the Zamazenta. Terra Ghost, Rocky Helmet with Will-O-Wisp is something that you see a lot on Terapagos teams to make sure that you have a Pokemon that can decrease that Zamazenta's damage output and just make sure it's not going to be able to play the game. Rillaboom here is just going to be for, you know, Fake Out, Wood Hammer, Grassy Glide U-Turn, the usual stuff, and that residual healing on top of the leftovers for Terapagos, making it a much more difficult Pokemon to break. But yeah, I had some notes actually. I wrote down some notes about notable teams I want to talk about. They're not like the best teams in the format, but there are some like really cool things I just want to note. So on my notes here, this was the biggest tournament of all time, obviously. We're going to talk about how Cornerstone was just super big in this tournament. Cornerstone, while it has been like strong throughout the season, this was really like the tournament where you saw like a huge outbreak of Cornerstone. And while it is competing mostly with Hearthflame, Hearthflame takes a more offensive role. But Cornerstone, while it isn't like any slouch on the offensive side of things, it just having like these support tools to enable a ton of Pokemon is what makes it so valuable. You see it next to Terapagos, you see it next to Calyrex Ice, you even see it next to some like more niche Pokemon here and there. I'm trying to see if I can find one of those that isn't. I think I've seen it next to like a Calyrex Shadow at some points as well. But yeah, I just want to note that this is a big tournament for Cornerstone. Joe Ugarte, another team I want to mention. Usually when you see Dittos in these formats, they're actually Choice Scarf, because Choice Scarf Ditto is just going to allow you to copy the opposing Pokemon. Like, let's say you're facing against a Terapagos and they got to like a bunch of Calm Minds. Well, now you also get those Calm Minds and you get to KO them, or KO like their team with Terra Starstorm while also outspeeding them. But it's also the case for like opposing Pokemon like Miraidon, like Koraidon, like Groudon. You're going to be able to outspeed them and get KOs. But Ditto was actually Focus Sash on this team. And that sort of makes sense. While it is not going to be getting that speed boost, it is really nice getting to just have 2 hits with this Pokemon. The team doesn't have like a ton of speed control, but it has a lot of support. You have obviously the Thunder Wave with the Grim Snarl. You have Fake Out with Iron Hands. You have Light Screen and Reflect to make sure that even though Ditto doesn't have like those incredible HP stats that Restricteds usually have, because it keeps its usual HP stat when it transforms, it is going to allow for the Ditto to be more likely to get multiple hits off, because in a lot of like matches, Ditto will end up like outspeeding a Pokemon, maybe taking a KO and then dying, because while it does have their defenses, that HP is super low. So the Focus Sash just guarantees that you get some value out of it. And yeah, no, like Ditto is just really cool. It's a really interesting adaptation on top of Miraidon. While this team isn't like the Miraidon, Iron Hands, and like Farigiraf core, it's like a more bulkier approach to that sort of deal. You have Urshifu Rapid Strike, you have Volcarona with Quiver Dance, you have the Grimmsnarl with Screens and Thunder Wave, and the Ditto is just going to be able to make it feel like you have 2 Restricteds more often than not. Or you can even copy like an opposing Urshifu and then just play like that. So there's a few things going on here that I just wanted to note. That was really cool. I really appreciate Joe for running that. And yeah, just broadly top 16 was pretty interesting. If you want to take a look at the usage stats for specific Restricteds, we can see that the #1 restricted in the tournament was Calyrex Shadow, which I think is to be expected. Europe really loves their Cali Shadows. They love their Cali Ices. And it is just like one of the best Pokemon in the format. It's a Pokemon that is able to spiral out of control due to its ability of Grim Neigh, and it's just incredible speed stat, and all the Pokemon that just really enable it. In second place, as far as usage goes, we have Miraidon, which we've discussed that broadly. It's been probably like the best Pokemon in the format for a couple of months here. Calyrex Ice just behind it at 16% usage. And then we have Zamazenta. Now, Zamazenta, I actually didn't see a lot of Zamazenta in Top Cut at first glance. I wonder how many there are. Hold on. So there wasn't a Zamazenta in top 4. There wasn't a Zamazenta in top 8. How many Zamazentas made day 2? There was one here at 13th. Rafe Osborne did manage to day 2 with Zamazenta in top cut. We see it's a body press, wide guard, Behemoth Bash set. Usually they're heavy slam. Ironhead turns into Behemoth Bash if you don't know. But this is really cool. We have seen Dondozo and Tinglu do pretty well in previous tournaments. I believe it was either top 4 or second at San Antonio. And it's just this combination of Tinglu and Dondozo where you're able to go for a Sand Tomb and trap something in with Dondozo's Yawn, and then just slowly wear them down with that combination of like Ruination and like Wave Crash to just chip things away. And because Dondozo doesn't have like a great special defense stat, Tinglu's able to supplement that with Vessel of Ruin. And obviously like Zamazenta, while it is like a very defensive Pokemon, it's more known for its physical defense. So having that Tinglu on the field next to Zamazenta makes it easier for Zamazenta to eat super powerful hits like that Electro Drift from Specs Miraidon, or even just Tinglu being like a one moose army to beat Miraidon. You're just able to like Sand Tomb it in and Ruination. And if they're not locking into Terra Fairy Dazzling Gleam, they're not going to be doing too much damage to you. And even at that point, you can scout for the Terra, wait for them to go for it. They go for that Terra Fairy Dazzling Gleam, you go for the Terra Poison, Sand Tomb them in, and now they're stuck because they can't Volt Switch because they're usually choice locked, and they're just going to be taking massive damage for the rest of the game. But yeah, this is a really cool team. As far as other Zamazentas go, there weren't too many. There were a few Dondozos. Most of the Dondozos didn't make it super far into the tournament. But Dondozo is like a really interesting Pokemon to note. Usually you pair Dondozo with a Galarian Weezing because Galarian Weezing loves to spread Toxic Spikes. Yeah, we see it here, Toxic Spikes, Poison Gas. And the general strategy with this is you use a super offensive Pokemon like usually a Calyrex Shadow Rider, but in this case it was an Ability Shield Koraidon. And just get as much damage as you can, try to KO as many Pokemon as you can, and then you just get rid of like the check that they have for the Dondozo, and you send in Dondozo and Tatsugiri while everything on the opposing side of the field is poisoned, and at that point they're just able to stall things out. You can see that like Dondozo is able to go for like Order Ups, Rest, Sleep Talks, and just stay on the field. It's really interesting that the Dondozo is actually Rocky Helmet here, because typically you like to see Leftovers or even Covert Cloak sometimes. It's really funny. But that allows for the Dondozo to have more longevity. But if you're running Rest and Sleep Talk, I suppose you don't really care too much about the damage you take. You can just keep spamming it until the other side of the field is just dead from the residual damage from the Toxic Spikes and Poison Gas. But yeah, Safety Goggles Tatsugiri is also really cool. Typically, Tatsugiri run like the Focus Sash item or even the Choice Scarf item, but on this team, I understand the idea with the Tatsugiri being the safety goggles, because in a lot of endgame situations, when you beat that Dondozo, there's usually going to be some Pokemon next to it that's able to follow up on that KO and deal with the Tatsugiri in one way or another, whether it be going for the KO with an attack, or in a lot of situations, you like to position your Amoonguss on the field so you can immediately sleep the Tatsugiri once the Dondozo is down. So that is really cool. I think safety goggles is a really nice choice there. But yeah, some really interesting picks I want to talk about from this tournament. I took some notes about weird Pokemon that made day 2. There was an Okidogi that made day 2. Heatran did pretty good. There was a Slowbro at like 109th, I think. I want to take a look at that. 109th. Yeah, there's the Slowbro. This was pretty interesting. Day 2 Slowbro. What do you even make of that? It was a Rocky Helmet Regenerator Heal Pulse Slowbro. Next to a Screens Miraidon. We have black glasses on the Urshifu. So, yeah, there was no Trick Room on this Slowbro. I think this Slowbro might be a matchup for Calyrex Ice, because you're able to spam the Scalds into Calyrex Ice. And if they Terra Fire, obviously you can't burn them, but if they Terra Fire, now they're taking a lot more damage from that Scald. And Regenerator and Rocky Helmet and Heal Pulse are obviously able to keep like the Slowbro and its teammates alive a lot longer in the match, so that is very interesting. Other Pokemon, there was a Araquanid at 118th that I noted before making this video. Oh, and this is also the Okidogi team. Okidogi's been a really cool Pokemon in this format because it has some pretty decent matchups into Calyrex Ice, because you're able to go for knockoff on the Clear Amulet. You're able to tank hits from it pretty well. It also has like a not terrible matchup into Miraidon, since a lot of them like to run Assault Vest. You're able to go for like Gunk Shot, while the Calyrex wants to go for like Terra Fairy Dazzling Gleam. So since they're more often Terra Fairy than not, that is a really solid Pokemon there. And yeah, this team seems to just be like hard Trick Room. Not hard Trick Room, actually. Wait, what am I saying? This team seems to be Psy Spam with a Calyrex, Shadow Rider, Life Orb, Terra Fairy, Astral Barrage, Expanding Force, Draining Kiss. And we have the Araquanid here, most likely as a Trick Room matchup. It's going to be able to block opposing Calyrex Ice, Glacial Lances, and Heat Waves from like Torkoals, or even like Hyper Voices from Ursaluna Blood Moon. So really cool team there. There was a Rayquaza at 173. Rayquaza at 173 is interesting. So Rayquaza is a weird Pokemon to want to run at a tournament, but the fact that this made day 2 is just incredible. We have not seen Pokemon like Rayquaza day 2 in a minute. But you can see this is a Clear Amulet Swords Dance Extreme Speed Rayquaza. That is like the only set that Rayquaza runs is Swords Dance Extreme Speed, because it's able to do it. Rayquaza's one niche it has over other Pokemon is its positive matchups into specifically Kyogre and specifically Groudon. The lore remains intact, and I guess it has a decent matchup into Koraidon, since it walls Koraidon's moves as a Dragon and Flying type. You just have to make sure you don't tear it into that thing. Dragon Ascent most likely one-shots opposing Koraidon because of how powerful that is. You have Coaching next to it with the Urshifu Rapid Strike and the Choice Scarf, meaning that you boost its physical defense and attack. You have the Chen-Pow to make sure that your extreme speeds are going to be dealing significant damage. And you have Ogerpound, Wellspring, and Incineroar to make sure that Fake Out and Follow Me let you go for Swords Dances. Another thing, there was an Empoleon at 161st. Here it is. Brian Fournier. Let's take a look at this. Okay, so if you don't know, in this generation, Empoleon actually got access to the ability Competitive. And Competitive is really interesting. It used to have the ability Defiant, which was just dead weight on it, since Empoleon isn't a great physical attacker. And it didn't have access to, like, Iron Head for some reason. It had to click Steel Wing. But from what I gather, this Empoleon is meant to deal with opposing Incineroar more than anything. Grass Pledge and Water Pledge is also really cool. Grass plus Water Pledge creates a swamp, meaning that the opponents have their speed quartered for a few turns. So that makes it easier for like an Ursaluna Blood Moon, even outside of Trick Room, to outspeed things. It makes it easier for Ogerpound to outspeed things. Or not Ursaluna Blood Moon, regular Ursaluna. And Spell Tag, Calyrex Shadow. Other than that, it's just like, you know, Psy Spam stuff. So, oh, Disable on the Calyrex is actually really cool tech. You can make it so you can like bait an opposing, I don't know. You can bait an opposing Calyrex into going for Astral Barrage into you, and you just like Terra Dark, or you can just like protect and then go for the disable into them and make it so they can't click their best move into you. At that point, Terra Dark just walls them because they usually only run Expanding Force, or if they're like, you know, nasty plot sets. But if they're like, you know, Calm Mind, Draining Kiss, that might be an issue. But this is really cool. I really appreciate that. Fun fact about Empoleon Water Pledge. Water Pledge isn't redirectable by Storm Drain. Very specific interaction, but cool nonetheless. And there's one thing I want to mention on top of all this. Someone, the person in dead last, had the guts to bring a Magnemite. Now, I'm not going to dunk on this person for getting last. The fact that they were brave enough to bring a Magnemite to the biggest tournament of all time takes a lot of guts. That takes a lot of guts. That is impressive, to say the least. I'm not sure what its role was. It was sturdy with Light Clay and Explosion. So from what I can gather, it would... It's also Terra Normal Explosion. Why not do like Magneton? I'm pretty sure it has higher attack. I guess it's just because Magnemite's slower. But it would go for Thunder Wave, Light Screen, Protect, and then Explode. And there was also a Bright Powder Amoonguss, which is kind of evil because you can just redirect moves into it and then they might miss. So that's really cool. Overall, this tournament, there was a lot to glean from. Koraidon is not as bad as we had anticipated, or maybe it is and Wolfie's just the GOAT. But we saw a little bit of a fall of Zamazenta. We see Miraidon performing just as good as it ever did. And Terapagos not as heavily represented as it was in the past. Kyogre is doing pretty well. Not too much to say beyond that. But yeah, those are my thoughts on this tournament. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I'll be doing this every time we have another major. We'll do a little intro. I'll explain like the team that won. And then we'll get into the broader tournament usage stats. If you enjoyed, leave a like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and new video on Friday. See you then.